These my dance make it hurt. These my dance make it hurt.
Very much. Good evening and welcome everyone. Welcome here today as we celebrate and honor Mokena Makeka as he is inaugurated as the 71st President of the South African Institute of Architects. The SAIA Constitution makes provision for the election of a Vice President annually, who then goes on to serve a one-year term of office as the President. The President's official term is aligned to the SAIA financial year, which commences on the 1st of July and ends on 30 June annually. SAIA, as a recognized voluntary association, including its 9 existing regional institutes, was originally established in 1927 and renamed the South African Institute of Architects in 1996. The mission of SAIA is to act as the collective voice serving the interests of its members in pursuit of excellence and responsible design. SAIA aims to uphold the dignity of the architectural profession and contribute meaningfully to the enhancement of society and the environment. The fundamental principles of equity and justice are enshrined in and implicit in our Constitution. Mokena will share his vision for his term of office with us when he gives his inaugurational speech further on in the program. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Professor Amira Osman, SAIA's immediate past president. Amira Osman is a Sudanese South African architect, researcher, academic, activist, public speaker, and author. She is a professor of architecture at the Tshwane University of Technology and holds the position of the South African Research Chair in Spatial Transformation, Positive Change in the Built Environment. Amira is a joint coordinator for the International Open Building Implementation Network, the immediate past president of the South African Institute of Architects, and convener of the conference series, A City is Not a Tree, the Urban Ecologies of Divided Cities. She is the director of Platform 100, a think tank and collaborative vehicle for promoting change in conversations and practice around architecture, space, and cities. Amira is a registered professional architect and the editor of the Built Environment in Emerging Economies book series. Amira has extensive experience curating international events, coordinating complex programs and exhibitions in terms of design, conceptualizing content, and managing diverse teams.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you. Welcome everyone to this very important event where we welcome Mokena Makeka as the president of SAIA. I know I repeat myself often, unapologetically so. I used a simple image throughout my term as SAIA president of a street scene with mixed-use residential buildings on the edges, activity, people, and commercial functions. In stark contrast to how I was trained in the 80s, I believe that a building is about what it contributes to its surroundings, how it interfaces with streets and public space, and how it relates to its neighbors and site boundaries. A building is also a product of a decision-making process including many, rather than a detached object to be celebrated in isolation and designed by an individual. I have no doubt that some still prefer to celebrate the talented individual architect and the beautiful object, and I am not immune to that. Architecture, after all, is very seductive. But I do aim to avoid archi-speak, and I use my words intentionally and deliberately to reach out to others in an attempt to make our work more meaningful and impactful. With this in mind, we contributed 2 think pieces to the Sunday Times Infrastructure Supplement. One was titled, "Why Considering Housing as a Form of Infrastructure Makes Economic Development and Poverty Reduction Sense." And the second article was titled, "Creative Cities Are Cities That Optimally Harness the Skills of Architects." In my manifesto, I repeated my often used text. The architectural profession has a critical role to play in the achievement of human settlements that are more equitable, beautiful, and functional, and that increase opportunities, offering people a better chance at improving their lives and livelihoods. I am proud to belong to an institute that understands its role in these matters. Indeed, just today, SAIA, through a collaborative effort, has offered feedback to government over the years, SAIA has offered feedback to government on various documents, and just today, SAIA offered feedback to government on the housing white paper. The omission of the architectural profession from this document, as well as other policy documents, is alarming. We have much work to do. With an understanding that the complex real-life problems of our cities and settlements cannot be solved within the confines of a single profession, we participated in the International Union of Architects Congress in Copenhagen in 2023. We collaborated with different disciplines and aimed to represent SAIA as an entity that values collaboration, that is inclusive, and that engages with other professions in creative ways. Our collaboration with an artist documenting cities through sound puzzled some, I think in a good way. Nothing I know of that adds intellectual value can be delivered without challenging us in some way. The Aziz Tayoub movie was downloaded 300 times on the first day of the event, and to date has been downloaded 1,615 times. It was an attempt to showcase South Africa in a way that highlighted stories and people that have often been omitted from the architectural scene. Exhibiting images of award-winning projects, which we celebrate and hold in high regard, but could easily be found online, just seemed too easy a road to take. But speaking of awards, the last year we were led on a joyful journey of exploration on the SAIA Awards program, where we traversed the country with a great jury. The level of architectural innovation and excellence that we have in South Africa is truly something to be celebrated. I had served on a SAIA jury before in 2010 with Judge Albie Sachs, and this time I had the honor of serving with the very Reverend Michael Weeder. Both brought unique insights into how they perceive cities and buildings, reminding us that architecture is indeed political and how it impacts on people's lived experiences. How we build, where we build, and how we make decisions about our cities and neighborhoods says something about our belief systems. My term was about transformation, where I emphasized that every project and site-level intervention has the potential to be transformational, as I do believe that experimentation and innovative projects are as important as policy change. So every project is celebrated in terms of what it brings to a broader societal conversation about how we inhabit cities and space. My term had a very specific focus, to have a voice beyond our boardrooms and studios and to engage the broader public in matters of the built environment and spatial transformation. I understand that we operate as a team. I am incredibly privileged to have worked with the people that make up SAIA, those that are there long-term, and those like myself who pass by very briefly and try and make some small contribution in just a few months. We all do our best, and we are very passionate about the profession and its organizations. Building up systems based on the excellent work of my predecessors and leaving a clean organization for my successors was my intention. Mokena and Claire, I hope I have achieved what I set out to do in this regard. Having said this, this evening is about Mokena. Mokena and I go back very far, when we started working together in 2010 to plan for UIA 2014 Durban under the theme Otherwhere. I think it was about 2018 when Mokena sent me a WhatsApp, and if I remember correctly, it simply said, "It's time for Otherwhere 2.0. This WhatsApp led us on a great journey of exploration together where we aimed to serve the profession. It's an incredible coincidence that we ended up working towards these aims under the umbrella of SAIA. So I'm moving on to read Mokena Makeka's bio. Mokena Makeka is an adjunct professor and the special advisor to the Vice President of Academic Affairs at the Cooper Union in New York and partner affiliate at Aksum, an Afrocentric impact firm working at the intersection of climatic positive urbanism and related ecologies. He is a leader in issues related to society and urbanism, emergent technologies, generative AI and social equity, climate change, forests and urbanism. He is at the forefront of thinking on contemporary inclusive cities and is focused on ecological and socio-economic justice. A passionate and transdisciplinary teacher, his expertise covers infrastructure and institutional change management strategies. Mokena Makeka was raised in Maseru, Lesotho and New York, USA, and is an accomplished architect, artist, creative, curator, global leader, scholar, speaker, and urbanist. His passions lie in the intersection between design and regenerative development, just ecology and inclusive economies, and the role that infrastructure and human-centered design strategy plays in that. Climate-smart forest economies and art are core passions of his, alongside cities and the circular bioeconomy. Mokena has a passion for foreign affairs and geopolitical economics and is well-versed in the post-colonial landscape of the African continent and sub-Saharan Africa, the Americas, and Europe. He is a board member of the Green Building Council of South Africa. He has been a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on Design. He's also an Archbishop Desmond Tutu Fellow in 2014 and an Aspen Fellow in Leadership 2020 to 2022, and one of the world top 100 architects you need to know. He holds a BR cum laude from UCT and executive leadership qualifications from the Harvard Kennedy School, from Oxford University, SAIA Business School, and from Wits University. He was the Azrieli Visiting Critic of 2020 Carleton University School of Architecture and Urbanism in Canada. He was a young global leader at the World Economic Forum in 2015 and is a member of the WCS Young Leaders in Urbanism in Singapore. He was one of 5 global advisors to the Climate Smart Forest Economy Program. Through his passion for just ecology, he has been an esteemed educator and a leader for the integrated system thinking of land-based natural environments. His expertise touches on landscape design and innovation strategy, afforestation, combating soil erosion, and sustainable farming design. He is the co-chair of the 2021 Global Stakeholder Dialogue on Mass Timber Building Materials under the Climate Smart Forest Economy Program. Mokena's previous position within an organization called Dahlberg, he was an integral lead in Dignified and Green Livelihoods Initiative and served on the World Economic Forum Initiative 30 by 2030. His areas of expertise are strategy, digital infrastructure, urban development, climate smart design, land use planning, rural development, communications, transport, and architecture. In 2017, Mokena was one of the 40 young global cultural leaders of the World Economic Forum at Davos. He was recognized for speaking truth to power and seeking to change the world for the better, alongside such luminaries as Shakira and Forrest Whitaker. He is the youngest recipient of various awards for architectural excellence and is now the youngest president of the South African Institute of Architects in its history. His other passions lie in the intersection between design and sustainable development, just ecology and inclusive economies, and the role that infrastructure and human-centered design strategy plays in that. Mokena is committed to education, social transformation in cities and environments of spatial and ecological justice. He is particularly concerned about the positive role that infrastructure can play in economic and ecological justice. As a sought-after speaker, Mokena makes time for between 7 to 10 speaking engagements annually, where he offers insights on topics including thought leadership on African cities, design, social and spatial practices, and demographic change. He has extensive experience of chairing, founding, and serving on boards across the creative sector and the built environment. And some of these roles include the South African Heritage Agency, the Cultural and Creative Industries Federation of South Africa, the Cape Town Heritage Trust, the Isandla Institute, Bush Radio Station, Cape Africa Platform, and he was the ex-chairman of several of these boards. He served as National Strategic Advisor to the Minister of Human Settlements in South Africa and was on the National Council for Arts and Culture. Mokena led the international award-winning architectural and urban planning firm Makeka Design Lab Works, where Mokena offered high-quality design and strategic insight, innovative design solutions, and mentorship across various disciplines. He was the inaugural winner of the Gold Loerie Award for Communication Design in 2011, and the youngest national recipient of the Award of Merit, a two-time winner from the Cape Institute for Architecture. Winning the South African Council for the Architectural Profession Medal for 2001, and also winning various international design awards throughout his 18-year career. He has twice been named by the National City Press as one of the top 100 world-class South Africans. Mokena offers high-quality design and strategic insight, innovative design solutions, and mentorship across various disciplines. He brings a strong and distinctive leadership experience, an innovative mindset, rapid analysis, exceptionally strong communication skills, and experienced problem-solving acumen, ability to work under pressure in any role he takes on. He is fully familiar with corporate governance and organizational oversight. He is, of course, highly skilled in architecture design, transport interchange design, strategic design, integration of infrastructure, urban densification, civic architecture, creative economy, education and policy, strategic property development, report writing, review, project strategy, property portfolio diversification, and beneficiation. He has research ability and change management at a governance level across a wide set of interests, combining his Myers-Briggs personality type, INFJ, with his drive, strong developmental outlook for organizational effectiveness, asset enhancement, mentoring capacity, ability to work in teams, motivate diverse personnel towards common objectives with clarity and inspiration. And this makes him a real asset in any role he takes on. Something that Mokena and I both believe in very strongly is that good architecture is a basic human right, and that through a design process, one can harness the power to change not only the spaces we inhabit, but the socioeconomic reality of communities and stakeholders. So Mokena says that design is an increasingly critical tool to negotiate conflict, identify opportunities, and address the transformation of the environment and to create resilient cities and economies. Mokena, we are so incredibly excited to formally welcome you into this position. And yeah, welcome. We look forward, we've been enjoying your leadership and now formally welcome you into this position and look forward to moving forward with you. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone else. Welcome, Mokena.
Honored guests, friends and allies, esteemed colleagues near and far, thank you for attending. It's 11:22 a.m. right now in New York, but I'm aware it's the evening time back home in South Africa. I want to give a special thanks to the former president, Professor Amira Osman, friend, collaborator, leader, but also to clarifying that in many ways I see my presidency as an extension of hers. We share common values around this question of spatial transformation and the ways in which cities can be more inclusive and equitable. I see my presidency very much about reformation, which is complementary to transformation. And reformation is the sort of institutional reform, if you will, that will allow us to be more supportive of the type of transformation that we would like to see out there. I'd like to also pay tribute to all the former and future presidents of SAIA and say that I'm very proud to be part of this esteemed community who are stewards both of taste and aesthetics and helping to keep the profession together. And let us be clear that the standing of SAIA globally is quite significant. Many parts of Africa and beyond look to us for inspiration, insight, and perspectives. So we have a unique contribution to make, not only for our own members, but for the broader community. When I was asked about what the title of my talk would be about, I did agonize a little bit, but we landed on this notion of, the city of tomorrow. But some ask me, but why not the architecture of tomorrow? I think it's an important question. In many ways, Amira started to frame the importance of city and urbanization. And as you heard a bit from my bio, I care very much about how architecture aggregates to create societies and to create environments. In 1807, the poet William Wordsworth wrote a poem called "The World is Too Much With Us." And it was a critique of the Industrial Revolution and the impact of humanity upon nature, and also the beginnings and the signs of rapid urbanization. However, if we think of where we are today, the city of today is affronted with very similar challenges. We live in very unequal cities. We live in cities where resource challenges are particularly difficult. We live in cities where the notion of spatial and social justice is not necessarily carried out by all actors in the built environment. And quite importantly, and of late, we're increasingly recognizing the importance of environmental justice, justice for nature, justice for planet, as central to an understanding of how our humanity needs to occupy place and space and make community. But cities are not mere happenstance. They are products of economic and intellectual behavior. Even when we say that we have informal settlements which seem to have no author, they are in fact actually outputs of formal economic systems which produce certain types of generic behavior that you can see, whether it's in Cairo or it's in Lagos or even in the townships of South Africa. So we need to understand that there's an intersection between what is informal and formal, and that these things are products of actions, they're products of strategies, and in many cases, products of inactions. Now, cities have always been at the heart of how architecture, at least in the modern period, has thought of itself. In 1928, at the CIM conference at the Chateau de la Sarraz in Switzerland, Le Corbusier and Sigrid Gideon started to craft the bones, if you will, or solidify the scaffolding of what we would call the modern city, which Charles Jenks would argue saw its collapse in 1972 with the collapse of the Pruitt Eagle buildings. However, notwithstanding these sorts of that particular moment of modernity, and of course we can't ignore the Federal Highway Act of 1921 and 1956 in the United States, which had a huge impact in terms of how transport infrastructure began to order these cities, affecting Cape Town, Johannesburg, and many other sorts of cities. This particular period was defined in many respects by a sort of ignorance, if you will, of nature, a sort of notion that core ideas about what urbanization and what cities constitute could be distributed globally, in some respects, sometimes without much paying attention to environmental conditions. And in many respects, these sorts of ideas have given us the cities that we have today, which are hydrocarbon centric, incredibly unequal, very much exclusive, and also have a virtually similar aesthetic in terms of what these buildings look like. And of course, that has implications for architectural education. Now, there have been moments that have stood against this, the garden movement, new urbanism, many other sorts of periods where architects began to challenge this modern paradigm. But the reality is that for the most part of Africa, and to an extent South Africa, we've inherited these sorts of urban ideas and not really pushed the extent to which we can be transformative in terms of understanding indigenous knowledge, our own environmental challenges and resources, and at the same time responding to how we can think of architecture as a vehicle for job creation and ecological justice. Of course, there are many exceptions to the statement that I make, but it is important to talk about the general trajectory of the history of urbanization and modernity and how it has influenced city making and architecture. Now, in South Africa, this modernism was particularly different. It was overlaid with apartheid planning. And to this day, we still see the social and spatial economic scars and the dimensions of this thinking. It comes out very much in the way that our cities are structured, and it takes and will take a lot of effort and imagination to couple the design skills that we have as architects and other practitioners in the built environment, alongside with those who are involved in policy formulation with regard to how the economy is structured, and of course, civil society and communities at large. In many ways, the role of the architect as a tacit agent of these forces is undeniable, and we have to embrace that and the responsibility that it brings. But equally, legislation may change, but cities are stubborn things. So it's important to understand that even if we have these visions for new inclusive societies, that it will take time for these cities to become close to the vision of what we had hoped for in the years leading up to 1994 and the freedom of our country. This date of 1994 is actually significant for a number of reasons, and I'll refer to it as I go forward, because it actually led up to, in many ways, what I think was a seminal moment in terms of urban transformation for South Africa, and that was the World Cup, where, like it or not, a huge amount of capital came into the country, forming an extremely extraordinary urban moment, offering opportunities for changes in public transport, the ways in which cities structure themselves, public sidewalks, and so on. And of course, the largesse of this moment was not equitably experienced across the whole country. But in many ways, one could almost track between 1994 and 2010 and see it as the culmination of a narrative about how the country was starting to spatially redefine and rebrand itself, if you will. Having said that, the spatial promise of 1994 since 2010 up until now arguably has not had the same level of momentum or support. And I will expand on this later on when I talk about the challenges facing both the architect and the role of the built environment in this particular moment. But it's important to note that 2050, which is an important marker in terms of the ecological horizon development timeframe of the planet, is 26 years away. And if we think of what will be happening in 2050, we might think that's so far away. Why should we be preoccupied with it? There'll be 9.7 billion people on the planet at that time. 2/3 of those people will be in cities. There'll be a doubling of Africa's population, and South Africa's population in particular will go up from roughly 59 million at the moment to about 75.2 million by 2050. But what's interesting is that, in fact, 1994 was 30 years ago. 2050 is 26 years away. So for those of you who can remember 1994, it's important to think that 2050 is actually much closer than we think. What does this mean for South Africa, and why must we think carefully about what is the city of tomorrow? Currently, South Africa's inequality index is projected to be at 0.63, and for the last 4 or 5 years, if not longer, we have held the title of most unequal country in the world, sometimes in exchange with Brazil, but on the whole, we are unfortunately the holder of that title. This has huge implications for how we need to start radically thinking about the role of architecture. To the point of my good colleague, it's not just about making pristine objects for clients who happen to pay, but how do we deploy our skills and techniques to actually reduce the inequality that we see? How do we understand that that architecture in many ways is about the transfer of capital into built form that future generations can realize? A colleague told me that one of the best things that an architect can do is to make an incredible building for generations, so that future generations are actually the client, not the paying client in the particular moment. And in some ways, one can think of that as a form of financial redress for future generations. Having said this, I also don't want to paint a picture that South Africa has not done well since 1994. We've experienced the fastest transfer and growth of middle class in history of any particular country. We continue to enjoy a progressive constitutional infrastructure, but at the same time, we do have a number of challenges in terms of our hard infrastructure, energy supply, reliable transport, job opportunities, etc. So the work still needs to be done. When we recognize that a spatial economy can create opportunities and can create more growth and lead to inclusivity and to better governance, it starts to trigger the question about what is the role of the architect in that type of country underneath those types of conditions. Since 2010, architecture and built environment has arguably been on the back foot, partly due to broader economic reasons, partly due to changes in governance, partly due to a number of external pressures in terms of the role of architecture. Technology and the digital divide has sharpened significantly in the last couple of years. And in many ways, society doesn't often see architecture as a product that is valuable to their well-being, but often seen as a grudge purchase, and the pursuit of architecture is often seen as the race for the cheapest price. And this is exacerbated by various forms of procurement policies at various strata of society that often don't predicate quality first, but actually see price first. Couple that with ongoing joint ventures, which in many ways, on occasion, they can unlock the spirit of the architect, but can also erode the creative spirit of artistic expression, and indeed the bottom line of businesses that now have to divide their fees amongst 3, 4, or 5 more different enterprises, and yet doing the same amount of work. The question, therefore, my colleagues and friends, is this: are we purpose fit for the changing world? And when I say we, I refer both to the profession of architects, I refer to academia, but I also refer to the institutions that hold and give shape to the architectural profession. Do members see the value and full potential of the institute and the profession? And do they see a way in which they can contribute to increasing that value? The world has changed and continues to change rapidly. Education is shifting, and I happen to be fortunate to be party to a number of global as well as institutional discussions about what constitutes the core curriculum. What is it that actually makes an architect, and what is the effect of architect on society? These are positions in which the institute itself cannot be static, but actually needs to be at the foreground of making these conversations both valent, relevant, but as to my, and also as per my colleague, making sure that these conversations are moving out into the public domain. So it's important to publish, it's important to be in newspapers, it's important that the work of architecture is spoken about by other architects, and it's important for architects to be invested in spaces which aren't purely about the production of buildings, but in terms of policy formulation, strategic direction, and economic evolution. Why a manifesto? I was asked this when I submitted my manifesto for what I believe reformation could look like for the Institute. First of all, a manifesto is not a plan. It is a vision and a strategy to bring focus to what a plan could be. By its very nature, comes from the Latin word manifestum, which means to make clear or conspicuous. In an environment where it is very easy to take the incremental approach to transformation and not actually transform, you have these moments, another Latin word, interregnum, which is a sort of disruption, if you will, where you have to create a manifest moment in which you make clear or conspicuous that which you would like to see happening in the future. My term as president is very much about this notion of reformation, building on the legacy of the former president in terms of transformation. This notion of reformation will speak to a number of actions that you will be seeing in the months to come. New and revised committees to both flesh out what does this vision look like and how can we actually respond and serve our members better. New mandates that are of the market. New spaces for us to debate what does it mean to be engaged in community development if we think of architects as our community. What does it mean to be engaged in community development if we imagine that society is our community? How do we radically think different about the types of projects that we reward in terms of excellence? Because we as architects have a very unique role in ascribing value to our work. and the built environment and society follows what we recognize as being valuable. And that is an important responsibility to not only recognize excellence as it is, but to also show excellence as it should be in relation to the changing world that we live in. In addition, the architectural profession and community needs to seriously engage with the question of diversification. If we look at our counterparts in the built environment, whether it's engineers or elsewhere, the market specialization has allowed them to provide niches for themselves, to deepen their knowledge in particular areas of engineering, and to also to be more precise in terms of how they provide an offering to the market. I would put it that we as architects need to be very thoughtful of the next 5 to 10 years about what does market specialization look like for us, and what are the type of niches that allow us to be productive agents of society. Where are we? Where do we show up? And what do we do? You may have read from my bio that perhaps 50% of my work is not even in the architectural domain. And this was in recognition of being in rooms where architects were not present, but decisions were being made which affected our futures, which affected our ability to deliver, and in fact, our creative freedom. So I think it's vital that we as architects see ourselves as journalists, as writers, as project managers, as policy informers, as politicians, as change makers. Because in order for us to create the society that we need and believe in, that can make a better world, it is important that the architect, the definition and the role of the architect becomes both broad as well as deeper in terms of bringing a sensibility about why architecture is indeed a human right. This is probably the only way that we can serve our members better, by really understanding changing forces in the market and also making sure that we change with the times, but even better, that we change ahead of the times. I'm hopeful that through my small intervention and probably limited intervention with the Institute, that I can be part of that reformation that can take us to a point where we can grow our membership, we can be more visible in the places where we are required, we can support the growth of the profession, but also we can better serve society, because ultimately I would like to believe that that is why we are architects. We are here to serve society and the planet. Part of that means that we need to strengthen our relationship with our regulatory partners and authorities. They exist to ensure that minimum degrees of service and performance are upheld by the profession. But we exist as holding the values of the profession, and this is the power of the voluntary association model. It allows us to put forward what we believe is important for architects to do and to be doing, how we want to be seen, and also how do we conduct ourselves. We should not, and I urge all of you in your own private spaces, we should avoid the danger of the successes of the past to prevent us from seeing the opportunities of the future. The idea that what we have is fine, so we don't need to fix it. The world is changing rapidly. There are a number of forces affecting the profession and society, and we need to be active agents involved in that discourse, and not recipients of change, but actually agents of change. I want to share a quick story of why I think this is so important. A former mentor of mine, the late Rebel Fox, he asked me to design the National Council of Provinces in Parliament, a very prestigious job. It was my first of many jobs as a candidate architect. And Naledi Pandor was the client. And I had to design a chair for her. First chair that I designed, leather, everything, super interesting. But she wasn't happy with the chair. Frankly, she didn't like the look and feel of it. So she said that she told me that she wanted to talk to Rebel about my design. And when I went to Rebel Fox trembling, because the client did not like this chair, I wondered if I was at fault somehow. And he looked at me and he said, we will go and talk to Naledi, and we will determine who is the arbiter of good taste. We then went over to Parliament, and he defended my design. That was an entirely transformative moment for me, because it wasn't just about what did the client like, it wasn't just about the cost, but this notion about who is the arbiter of good taste. He infinitely understood that whilst the architect has many responsibilities underneath their charge, one of the few things that we cannot give to anybody else is aesthetic responsibility, if you will, and how can we apply good taste to architecture and make spaces that are meaningful and viable for society and to clients. But he also taught me that leadership in design is also an important feature of what we do. That good architects, by the nature of providing good architecture, and I use good in a broad egalitarian sense, not just look and feel, but that good architects are involved in a form of societal leadership through the buildings that we create, through our ability to push people's imagination. I also want to take this moment to recognize a number of people who have really been informative to my development, and without their guidance and frankly intense mentorship, I would not be here. The late Paul Regini, Matthew, Julian, and Justin Cook, that whole family, I owe them so much for my architectural career, my sensibilities, my sense of architecture. I owe them so much. I also owe Anya van der Merwe. She, from when I was a student, always been an amazing friend and eventually a colleague. I remember drawing with her up until late in the morning, still sketching with hand-colored pencils on pieces of bunk and creating buildings. An incredible mentor. Professor Joe Noero, and the same goes for Heinrich Wolf, an incredible duo who also I've drawn with them quite intensely many years ago, but those sketches still remain very close to my mind. But also what I learned from these people was their character and their spirit and how to show up as an architect. Raphael Marx, Manuel Mutsepe, Paul Matsipa, Haley Eber, Amira Osman, and many others. I want to also be clear that architects are still people. So we all have our imperfections. We all have our foibles in terms of how we produce our buildings, how we engage with others. But the people that I've listed to you, I would say that they are perfect mentors, but I, like them, are imperfect as persons. I ask for your patience through this process with me as I try to bring all of my knowledge and my passion and my energy and my expertise towards this question of reformation. But for those of you on the call, I also urge you, every architect requires a tribe. And your tribe is not the people that you work with. These are the mentors and the people who challenge you, who give you insight, who give you perspective. Find your tribe and you'll be able to become a better practitioner or a thinker. 3 tribe members who I do want to mention: Yalina Masajada, Jonathan Jacobs, Phil Mashabani. They are tribesmen of the latter part of my career, but no less important. But I also want to say this, and to all of you out there, to my colleagues in this journey in the months ahead. I may not always agree with either my colleagues or yourselves, but I will do my best to not be disagreeable. My commitment is to this country and to its members, irrespective of region. I'm not the president of a region. I'm not the president of a particular class. I'm the president for a short time of all of you. But hopefully I want to be seen as a president of future members who will come and rejoin our organization. I also want to be a president that can also carry our message in other sorts of spaces about the importance of architecture, making it clear to the financial sector, making it clear to policymakers about the impact that we can have, but also to inspire our members to take a voice up and not see themselves as the mere makers of buildings, but indeed the crafters of society. This is an awesome responsibility and an honor for me, which I cannot tell you how much it means to me. Thank you. Thank you for your trust. And also, thank you for the checks and balances that you provide to my thinking. Thank you, and may I continue to be part of this amazing trajectory to make a better institute. And to your question, Amira, yes, you were amazing, and you are amazing, and handed over an amazing infrastructure to be able to take things forward. My duty and my commitment to my vice president is to do the same as you've offered to me, which is to make sure that as much as I can do within my term, to make her term as easy as possible is also my mandate. Architecture is political. We are politicians, but politicians can be amazing positive agents for change. And with that, thank you.
Hi, my name is David Green, and for the last 15 years, I've been the CEO of the V&A Waterfront. And I'd like to congratulate the Institute on their forthcoming appointment of Mokena as the president. At the V&A, we're seeking to create the world's most inspirational waterfront neighbourhood. And over the years, Mokena has been integrally involved in helping us to achieve that. In all the projects that he's been engaged in, he always embarks on the project with great energy and enthusiasm. He rapidly understands the brief and always seeks to achieve something exciting for us. He always brings a refreshing creativity and progressive architecture. And I think the most reassuring thing about that, though, it's always backed by quite incredible and detailed intellectual and academic rigour. The V&A is an interesting space in Africa. At one level, we build and rent conventional buildings, but we're also a neighbourhood and we're private space. But the success of the waterfront, at least in part, is attributable to the space being run as if it was public space. Where Mokena has particularly helped us is in reimagining public realm and his practical sensitivity to the challenges and opportunities in designing some of the most democratic space and truly diverse space in Africa. And this is where he's particularly excelled. At the V&A, we try to lead in highly functional green buildings, and wherever possible, we're looking to imaginatively and sensitively repurpose historic buildings. Again, this is an area of enormous sensitivity that Mokena brings. Inspirational spaces don't just happen. They rely on great creativity and vision. And Mokena exemplifies this in spades. And I personally have really enjoyed working with his energy and vision over the years. I'm excited by what Mokena will bring to the Institute. And I'm particularly excited by the inspiration that Mokena is going to give people. So wishing you every success in your new appointment. Thank you.
To the South African Institute of Architects, guests present this evening, congratulations to you all. Congratulations on making a very, very important decision in appointing Mr. Makeka as the president of the South African Institute of Architects. You could not have made a better decision. I say this because in my interactions with Mokena, I've gotten to learn that he's a very, very passionate person about this industry and this discipline that is architecture. Really, at the heart of it, Mokena understands that architecture is not just about design, for construction, etc. He understands that architecture shapes the identity, the functionality, and the livability of cities, of spaces, of countries, of communities. He understands that the manner in which you plan where people live can also be a form and a tool for social cohesion. How people interact is shaped by where they live and how they live, and the spaces that they live, and how inspirational those spaces are, and how aspirational those spaces can be. I believe Mokena fully understands that this discipline can help us to bring the most marginalized and the most disadvantaged in the economy and in the country into economic activity, in the manner in which architecture can be an income generator, right? It can inspire tourism, it can inspire investment, it can inspire people from all over the world to come and visit this country, to see sites that can only exist because of the discipline that you lead. I believe Mokena understands that. He understands that architecture can also play a big role in helping us to articulate what is the agenda for sustainability and climate adaptation that we all have to embark on for the future of our world and the world that we're going to bequeath to our children. So I say congratulations because you made a wise decision. You must be proud of yourselves. And as much as I'm proud of him and I'm congratulating him, I'm also congratulating all of you for the great decision that you've made. And I wish the industry all the best. I wish the Institute itself all the best, and that you continue to take your central place in the economic development agenda and economic development conversations that this country is having and that this country is going to continue to have with the rest of the world. Congratulations, Mokena. Have a fabulous evening. Enjoy your night, and Godspeed in your journey ahead.
Good afternoon to you all from London. My name is Peter Oborne, and I'm President of the Commonwealth Association of Architects, of which, of course, SAIA is a long-standing member. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to contribute to today's inauguration, and let me start by thanking outgoing President Professor Amira Osman for her dedication and commitment during her term in office. I'm also, of course, absolutely delighted to join you in welcoming your incoming President, Mokena Makeka. I first met Mokena during the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which took place in Kigali in 2022, when he spoke very effectively in support of the SAIA's call to action on sustainable urbanization across the Commonwealth. And we were all obviously delighted when heads of government adopted the Declaration on Sustainable Urbanization at CHOGM that year, because this creates an important policy framework for the work ahead. So turning to the theme of today's event on architecture and its importance to cities, perhaps we should remind ourselves that today just over half of the world's population are urban dwellers. Yet by 2050, UN Habitat predicts that 2 out of every 3 people will be living in cities. That's an increase of 2.5 billion more urban dwellers in the next 30 years, with 95% of that growth taking place in Asia and Africa, where 95% of the cities most at risk from climate change impacts are to be found. Commonwealth countries alone are forecast to account for nearly 50% of that growth, representing a doubling of the urban population in the Commonwealth from 1 billion to 2 billion in the next 30 years. Such is the nature, scale, and complexity of the challenges to be faced that the coming decade will be make or break for cities and the planet. And architects, together with their professional institutes like SAIA, have a pivotal role to play, especially in the areas of advocacy, capacity building, and climate action. Central to this effort is the need for us to work much more collaboratively and at scale, not only across disciplines with other built environment professionals, but also across sectors and with economists, researchers, and others to advocate for the value of sustainable development, helping policymakers in both central and local government to make better evidence-informed decisions on built environment issues. The voice of built environment professionals has been missing from so many of these important policymaking forums for far too long, and we need to work harder and smarter to make ourselves heard while helping to bridge the gap between policy and practice, bringing our experience, our creativity, and our design thinking to bear. Capacity building and knowledge sharing is also vital if we're to address the critical capacity gaps identified in the survey of the built environment professions undertaken by the SAIA back in 2020, to which SAIA was an important contributor. And I'm delighted to say that SAIA is a member of the CAA's Knowledge Sharing Partnership, bringing together 16 member organizations from across the 5 regions of the Commonwealth to work together on shared challenges. Effective climate action is by far the most important and pressing aspect of the work ahead, both in terms of mitigation and adaptation. A recent analysis undertaken by the SAIA reveals that 50% of the CO2 emissions from Commonwealth countries are attributable to only 10% of its population, situated mainly in the industrialized north, while the other 50% is attributable to the remaining 90% of the population residing in countries which are experiencing rapid urbanization. So we need to bring our collective expertise to bear on a broad front, with policymakers, practitioners, and the public helping to ensure a just transition whilst leaving no one behind. I'm delighted once again to have had an opportunity to be part of today's proceedings, and the CAA looks forward to building on its long-standing relationship with SAIA in the coming period. My congratulations once again to your new president.